Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Flying Lotus album, Flamagra. Flying Lotus, LA, California legend, modern experimentalist, and of course, fearless son of a gun. Don't believe me, just watch his Kuso movie. That was something. In the early days of his Flying Lotus project, I gotta be honest, I wasn't into what he was doing, but I understood the hype and I heard that his live shows were great. But I very quickly got on the same page as him around the time of his Los Angeles album. It was a funky, jazzy, and incredibly visual album that was just scratching so many itches for me at the time. Great samples, strong grooves, like this was the sort of colorful blast of an album that I really needed at the time. And with his next album, Cosmogramma, he took all that, amplified it by 10, and made an even bigger and more impressive album. But to be honest, after that, I kind of sort of fell off with Flying Lotus for a while. I wasn't really into his Captain Murphy rapping project. And his Until the Quiet Comes album, while it wasn't necessarily a bad album, I just kind of felt like for the first time in a while, Flying Lotus was on cruise control. But he bounced back in a big way with the You're Dead album a couple of years back. It was very guest heavy, and he touched down on more genres than ever, which was shocking at the time, to me at least, but really exciting. Now, it's been like 4 or 5 years since we've heard from Lotus, and these singles have been completely off the rail, totally all over the place, and this album, to be honest, has taken me a long time to collect my thoughts on. Nonetheless, here we are. Let's chat about Flamagra. Now, first things first, there's a lot of material here. This is by far Lotus's longest project, track-wise and length-wise. For better and for worse, we're going to get to that. But for the most part for this album, Flying Lotus sounds totally fine, totally great. Post-Requisite early in the album is pretty standard. We get some funky bass licks, some very stellar atmospheres. However, at least for now, I feel like some of the first tracks on the album are a little less jazz-inspired than he's been going down the route of the last couple of years. And Heroes in a Half Shell is the first genuinely stunning track here. It's just as interplanetary as some of the other tracks here, but for me, this track just feels so free. It's moments like this that I really feel like Flying Lotus just has all these ideas coming to him and he doesn't have to reach for them. Pilgrim's Side Eye is a little wonky, but at least Flying Lotus here seems like he's got his head in the right place. The bass licks are funky and the constantly shifting synths are all over the place. But the jaw-dropping release here makes it all worth it. All Spies, on the other hand, is a completely different track for Flying Lotus, and it's really interesting, mostly because it's very mysterious. Not to mention, it's got some of the best production on this entire album. The patience here, and the way that he brings in the beat that eventually dominates is fascinating. Like, this is the sort of short, to-the-point tune that just starts an idea and finishes it quickly that coming from Flying Lotus I really appreciate. Inside Your Home, on the other hand, like, this is totally different. This is super, super classy. Sort of laid back with a lot of jazz influences, nothing we haven't heard yet, but it very quickly takes off, gets very in your face, and becomes incredibly cosmic. Like, it's hard to follow at times, but trust me, sit with it, you'll thank me. Andromeda, once again, sounds freaking awesome. It's honestly like a really perfect Flying Lotus track. It's very spacey, it's very jazzy, with plenty of electronics thrown in. It's direct and it's in your face, but it's also very tuneful. And Remind You comes off like a ballad, which is something we don't hear a lot of from Flying Lotus. It's a spacey one with tons to say, but a ballad nonetheless. It's moments like this that I totally get the hype on this album. Like, Flying Lotus, in this instance, brought his A-game. Not only is it very chilly and cosmic, but it's also very human and sweet sounding. As far as sampling goes, Pygmy's one of my favorite tracks here. It's very short, it's very to the point, but it just shows Flying Lotus really building to something very epic very quickly and almost out of nothing. And FF4, while it's one of the shortest tracks here, brings in some elements of G-Funk and is like seriously classy. There's some great laid-back grooves, and while it's short, it's a complete thought, and I love that. Now, move over You're Dead, because this album is his most star-studded with guest spots to date. Very early on, we get more featuring Anderson .Paak. And call me nuts, but I kind of think this one is middle of the road. I mean, Anderson sounds fine and all. As a matter of fact, his vocals are great. But for the first entire half of this track, I feel like there's a really awkward disconnect between Flying Lotus and Paak. Flying Lotus on Your Dead, like years ago, really perfected the way that he was going to bring artists on and collaborate with them. But this one just takes so long to get going, it doesn't even end up coming off like a collaboration, it comes off like a mashup. Trust me guys, there are a lot of guest spots here, like I said, for better and for worse. Not really into Burning Down the House featuring George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic fame either. I do sort of like the breezy funk of this track a lot. But from a writing perspective, this track is a mess. Like a whole lot of the other collaborations here, I feel like these guests that Lotus brings on are doing way too much to progress this very cosmic atmosphere, which is usually something that Flying Lotus handles. No, in tracks like this, guys like George Clinton are just trying a little too hard, I feel like. However, Spontaneous featuring Little Dragon is actually a great collab. I love the fidgeting instrumental here and just how hard to place this one is. And Little Dragon's contributions are very soulful and very sweet. Not only that, but this one just doesn't overstay its welcome. I was really hyped up to hear Yellow Belly featuring Tierra Whack. And once again, she's great. Her very kooky, personality-drenched performance here is actually, like, fantastic. And lyrically, I think this was actually made for, like, a Flying Lotus track. But this instrumental here, and the production is so middle of the road. But one of the best collaborations here comes in the form of the Black Balloons Reprise featuring Denzel Curry. Like, these two have a serious connection. I love the way this one starts off so dark, so quiet, so brooding, but it very quickly builds. I love the hazy samples here that you may recognize if you're a big Quasimodo guy like I am. And the jazz rap feel here is absolutely brilliant. Like, not to mention, Denzel's performance here is incredible. He continues to be on top of the game right now. And like, I like Fire Is Coming featuring David Lynch because I'm a big David Lynch guy, but this is barely a song, even when the beat drops halfway through. But on Actually Virtual, Shabazz Palaces show up for a guest spot, and they honestly sound like they were made for this album. I love the freakish vocals and just how hard, once again, it is to pinpoint anything here. Like, honestly, this is what I expected to hear from most of these collaborations, and for now, this is great. 9 Carats featuring Toro y Moi isn't that bad either. I love the gigantic synths here and just how massive this track as a whole sounds. And while I've usually been very critical of Chaz's very airy vocals in the past at times, I think they go great here. Not to mention, his more cool verse here that he eventually gets into comes off really great too. And honestly, Lotus saves 2 of the best collaborations for last. First, we get The Climb featuring Thundercat, and like, with all the sloppy collaborations and the unfinished ideas on this album, thank God Flying Lotus and Thundercat can still jam. There's a very groovy track that certainly would have felt at home on Your Dead. It's equal parts cosmic and classy, and Thundercat sounds incredible on this hook, honestly. The backing strings are really great, and this funk is gigantic. I love this track. And after all the garbage I gave her on her own album this year, Land of Honey featuring Solange might be the best collaboration here. This track adds so much drama to the album, a genuine sadness that I did not see coming. Like, why is it that everything that she's done this year, but her own album, is coming off so great? It's such a subtle track, even though it's so vast. The strings have so much power, and that last guitar solo is freaking awesome. Like, I have nothing bad to say about this track at all. But I don't know, for me, there's also a lot of tracks here that just kind of show Flying Lotus in the middle of the road. Maybe not terrible, but just very average, and sometimes not even worth talking about. Heroes, which starts this album off, has a very cinematic edge to it. But why do I feel like this track is like almost cheating? He was so good at used to being able to bring us into his world very quickly. This is just a little too much. The bass solo is fine, and the seemingly endless synths are great. But this one kind of like made me start this album off on guard in a weird way. Capillaries to me is the worst track here. Like, this to me doesn't even sound like a Flying Lotus track. Like, in return we do get some cool jazzy licks and all, but I honestly feel like I could have heard this anywhere. Tekashi, to be honest, really confused me going into this album. I mean, give it up for Flying Lotus. He's bringing in genres that he's never even touched. That's big. Like, in this case we get almost like a reggae crossover vibe. But this track is over 6 minutes long, and it takes so long to even get going. Like, it eventually becomes like a sort of bouncy, funky tune, but why do I just feel like a lot of this album is kind of unfocused? And late in the album, things just go from kind of unfocused to genuinely head-scratching. Say Something to me is seriously confusing. Like, to me, I feel like this track wasn't meant to be here. This is just a fraction of an idea and nothing more. Debbie is Depressed is a very low-key and emotional jazzy tune. And like, don't get me wrong, it's certainly skillful and all. But I don't know, some of the vocals here are some of the cheesiest of the bunch. And tracks like this, to me, just lack character. Find Your Own Way Home. Once again, what the hell is this? I don't even feel like this track is a fraction of an idea. Like, there's a nice synth here and a sweet atmosphere there, but nothing else. In the later moments of the album, Thank You Malcolm kind of picked me up a little bit at first. Like, I liked how breezy the track is, but when I really dug into it, there's really not much here. It sounds nice from a distance, but upon further inspection, like, this adds nothing to the album. And Hot October as a finale. Oh no, God no, this is not where I wanted to hear Flying Lotus end anything. The last thing I needed was lounge music and distorted vocals that drift away into mush and nothingness. So this album is certainly a trip for Flying Lotus fans. It's going to be a required listen, obviously. Like, at its best, like, he's bringing in some incredible collaborators and having real chemistry with some of them. He's branching out into jazz and funk and bringing in elements of genres that he's never touched. The fact that he's at this stage in his career, still trying new things, and is literally more fearless than ever, is fantastic and exciting. But to me, there are a couple of wasted guest spots here, and some seriously unfinished ideas that bring this album down a few pegs. No, this isn't a bad album, but my friends, all I could say is the year of the good album that could have been an awesome album if it was trimmed down just a little bit rages on in a big way. I'm feeling a decent 7 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you'd like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.